Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time.
Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. I don't know if you know it, but about 5% of cow's milk is lactose. Why is this important? Well, it was important for me because I was making yogurt. I make yogurt on a fairly regular basis, but even after all of these years, it's still hit and miss. And some of the times it would be perfect, and at other times it would be runny, and sometimes just in between. And I didn't know why. And that's when I learned about lactose. When you make yogurt, you don't have to do anything fancy. You just have to get the milk up to a point of 90 degrees centigrade and then let it cool down to about 40 degrees centigrade, which is about room temperature in a really hot country. And then you add a tiny bit of yogurt that you already have to that milk, and then you let it sit. What happens next is something close to magic. The bacteria in the yogurt that you've introduced then starts to eat the lactose. And they just gobble it up like hungry teenagers. And in doing so, they create lactic acid. And that lactic acid then goes on to become what we know as yogurt. The mistake that I was making was that I was adding 2 or 3 teaspoons of yogurt to that milk. And therefore, all of the bacteria would attack that limited amount of lactose at once, and there would be no lactic acid created or very little lactic acid created. And as a result, I would get runny yogurt. Now, this might seem obvious to someone who already knows it, and you can see it on their face because they go, yeah, so? But this is the kind of thing that we go through in life where we don't realize the obvious elements of life. In this podcast today, we're going to cover 3 points. It's about the obvious factors in life, the not so obvious angles to succeeding in life and how we could go about it. I think you'll enjoy it. What are the 3 things that we'll cover? The first is be interested. The second is be interesting. And the third is the 3 wise men principle. Let's see how this plays out with friends, family, but also in business. We'll start with the first, which is be interested. I remember the time that I got back from my holiday in Fiji. What did you do in Fiji? Someone asked me. I started to talk, but I found that I couldn't get very far. I might have told just one story of the trip, and then I was listening to what they did on their Fiji trip. I'd heard about the warm water, how they had an area that was safe to swim, what they ate and the entertainment they experienced. Didn't you want to know about my trip? Yes, they did, but let's just say that we're a little self-centered. We know this for a fact because we can be at a party and someone starts talking about their day, and almost unconsciously, we want to tell our story. In fact, we're not even listening to the other person completely because we are formulating our story in our minds. What would change if you were interested? Well, for one, you would stop talking and you would start listening. At some point, the other person is going to stop talking. That's when you ask the second question. They'll talk, and then you ask the third question. All the while, you're listening to what they're saying. When you ask questions, it signals that you're interested. It's not just the signal alone that matters. Yes, the other person wants to answer your question and feels good that you're so interested, but there's something bigger happening. You're not thinking of your own frickin' story. You're not in your own world. If you've got 3 questions back to back, you have to listen to what the other person is saying. Your questions can't be random. You have to listen to their answers. Your story, no matter how wonderful and great it is, will just have to wait. Being interested in people can open almost any door in the world, even with strangers. When I started taking photos of people at work in New Zealand a few years ago, I was confronted with a slightly frustrating problem. I didn't know how I was going to take pictures of people in New Zealand. When you're traveling, you're a tourist and you look like one. And if you point a camera at a stranger, it's not good practice, but very few people object. But once I go back to New Zealand, how could I just walk into a cafe and take a photo? Or if I saw a mother with a kid, I might have to take that picture surreptitiously and get out of the way. Instead, I learned that I just needed to be interested. It started with a single question. It was a question that anyone could answer. Just 3 words. Is it difficult? Yep, that's it. Just those 3 words. Is it difficult? To the guy who's about to sail to an island, you ask, is it difficult? To the guy picking up the garbage, you ask, is it difficult? To the mother with the kid, is it difficult? You could step through the door and ask your partner, your kid, or your neighbor, is it difficult? Then listen to what they have to say and ask 3 more questions or 2 questions. And as we covered in the previous podcast, this also applies when you're selling something. It's not hard to just ask 3 questions. Once they answer, it's just a matter of following the thread, asking more. You don't have to stop at 3. You can keep asking, but at some point it just becomes too much. Don't tell them your story. Be interested. Be interested in them, in their lives, in their problems. And that's when you get interest from the other person. But being interested also works to your advantage. We were in Frankfurt and the waitress was not being helpful. Has it been a hard day? Renuka asked her. It's been so tiring, it's so hot, and I've had to go up and down the stairs with cakes and coffee. I'm so tired. I just want to go back home and sleep. Do you think we got better service after that? You always get the attention of the other person when you're interested in them. And sometimes you don't even have to ask the questions, though they are pretty crucial. But people will tell you things if you are listening. Harvey Mackay, author of Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive, wrote about his envelope company and how it wasn't getting a foot in the door with a multinational. One day, the CEO mentioned that his son collected stamps of obscure countries. And that's what Harvey Mackay did next. He collected stamps. He knew the CEO wasn't stupid. This wasn't a charity stamp donation in action. Even so, when he gave those stamps to the CEO knew that he had been paying attention. So people know when you're interested. They know when you've listened to them. They know when you're asking questions and when you're asking the second question and the third question. Being interested in someone is not easy. It's very hard work. However, once you stop thinking of your own thoughts and your own worries, you'll notice that people see you in a different light. Whether your goal is to take pictures, to get some business, or just to let the waitress know that you've noticed, being interested is what makes all the difference. However, there's a downside to being interested. Once people have told you their story, their problems, they realize that things are becoming a bit one-sided. They want to know more about what you do, your thoughts, etc. Now, you have to be interesting. Which takes us to the second part, which is being interesting. How much would you pay for a tulip? How about 4 fat oxen, 8 fat swine, 12 fat sheep, 2 hogsheads of wine, 4 tons of a beer, 1,000 pounds of cheese, 2 tons of butter, a bed, a silver cup, A set of fine clothes, 2 lasts of wheat, and 4 lasts of rye. If you lived in Holland in the year 1630, tulips were the rage. It is rumored that around the year 1633, a single bulb of the Semper Augustus tulip was more than sufficient to feed, clothe, and house an average Dutch family for half a lifetime. In an age where the average Dutch family earned just 150 guilders a year, 40 bulbs of tulips were sold for 100,000 guilders. So what's the surprising part of this story? There's a chance that you've never heard of tulip mania until now. It's recorded as one of the biggest speculator crazes in history, and just a few people seem to know about it. In the world that's seemingly saturated with information, people don't seem to know very much. They know what they see in the news, they know their politics, they know a whole bunch of stuff that everybody seems to know, but that's where they seem to circle endlessly. Once people leave school or college, they almost never seem to add to learning about history or geography or science, and, of course, freakish tulip auctions. And there's a good reason why this happens. In school or college, the only real activity is to study and to learn, and once you get into the working world, we have a lot more responsibility. You've just done a trip and you have to pay the toll for the trip. You have to put out the garbage. You have to remember to call the electrician. And these are just some of the thousands of things that we have to do every year. And then there's work. There's all of this marketing stuff that you have to learn, video and audio and text and writing articles and drawing. No, not so much drawing. But the point is that we have all of this stuff that we have to keep on top of. And to add even more elements to our to-do list seems almost too much. Yet, most of us love when someone else is interested. The thought of running into someone like David Attenborough is always more enticing than running into your neighbor down the street. Or running into anyone in your family who's just going to go on and on about all the problems in the world. And the reason why some people are more interesting than others is firstly because they're interested. They're interested in you. They ask you questions. And if they run into you, you'll notice that they ask a lot of questions. However, in their own time, they're also learning about a variety of things. If you look at some of the most talented people in the world, you'll find a common thread. When we say talented, we don't mean someone who's just good at one thing, like swimming or basketball or physics. Marie Curie was awarded 2 Nobel Prizes. Her core work involved radiation and discovering the element radium. However, she was also interested in how to fit out ambulances. She made sure that hospitals were using the X-ray machines correctly during World War II. In an age where few, if any, women drove, she would drive one of the X-ray ambulances herself. And then there's Rabindranath Tagore, Indian poet, writer, philosopher, musician, and artist. He was also the first non-European Nobel laureate in literature. You've surely heard of Albert Einstein. Einstein was an accomplished violinist. He played in chamber groups and with friends. He was a prolific writer in scientific and non-scientific domains. He served as a professor at various institutions, including the Swiss Federal Polytechnic, an institute for advanced study in Princeton, and all of this blah, blah, blah. What is it all about? It is about the fact that what you consider to be interesting in a person is their interest in learning stuff that's interesting. Because we want to know people who aren't just the same run-of-the-mill people all the time. But more importantly, when people are interested in many things and they start to get good at many things, they become more interesting to themselves and to you as well. How do you become more interesting? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. But usually, the question can be answered with one word: hobbies. A hobby allows you to go deep into any subject matter without being monetized in any way. The hobby exists just for you, but you learn stuff like, how to make yogurt, for instance, or how to make a better biryani, These are kind of things that are interesting to yourself, but also to others. Does that mean that people obsessed with work are boring? You know that the statement is not true. A person who's deep into their work isn't necessarily boring. However, work, and more work, it's very limiting in some way. In a similar way, and over time, people who can only talk about one thing over and over again, their work, well, that's really boring. Who would you rather spend time with? A person who knew just about one thing, or a person who knew about physics, could talk about ice cream, volcanoes, and curry leaves? You don't have to stay in the dark ages once you leave school and college. While books are interesting, the range of books you read is almost unending. There are so many books. YouTube can be addictive. You can watch comedy, geology, history, photography, and you don't even have to do the mix and matching yourself. You just have to start looking at a few videos, and YouTube will fill your feed with whatever you start watching. In tiny bites, you can stop filling your head with pointless politics and crime and be a much smarter, more interesting person. Being interesting requires you to be interested. But people who are interested in diverse people and things and activities, they're the people that you want to hang around. So yes, you have to be interesting. Yes, you have to be interested. But there's one more thing. And that is fundamental. That's like the base level of everything. And I'm going to call it the principle of the three kings. Or as they're commonly known, the three wise men. You're likely to have heard the story of the three wise men. In the Christian faith, the birth of Jesus is heralded by angels. It is also said that shepherds showed up. However, the bit that gets the most airtime is the arrival of the three wise men. It's unlikely that there would have been any story if they had shown up empty-handed. Instead, these three wise men are described as bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the baby Jesus. They could have just shown up and satisfied their curiosity, but no, they had to bring gifts. Gift giving is a crucial part of the human psyche. You know this to be true because it's likely that you were once a very selfish, self-centered person. If you had a toy and it was your own, that was it. You just didn't want to share it with anybody. You would cry, throw tantrums if it were taken away from you. As you got more toys, obviously you would share, right? No, you weren't ready to part with any of your stuff. You refused to share. And your parents would have slowly imparted, perhaps underlined, the importance of sharing and giving. Giving becomes absolutely crucial to life. No one should show up empty-handed because giving is what humans are all about. When you look around, you may think that the opposite is true. People show up to your house empty-handed. People seem to be more selfish and self-centered than ever. It's a perception, of course. That's because giving is easier than being selfish. It's a lot of work being selfish. It's frustrating to show up empty-handed. When you get to someone's place and everybody's bought something, when you show up empty-handed, you stand out from the rest. The host knows it, you know it, and possibly everybody else knows it as well. But when you show up with a gift, no matter how tiny, you get a warm glow of appreciation from the other person. And almost instantly, the other person wants to give something back. This transfers the glow back to you. The whole space is instantly charged with a feeling of warmth that cannot exist if one of the parties are self-centered. When you don't give, and I'm talking about almost every instance, whenever you meet someone, whether it's for dinner or you met them at the airport or you've met them pretty much anywhere, there is an opportunity for giving. And if you're not giving, then you're thinking about yourself. You're just who you are maybe for now, but you can change. You can become like those three wise men. There's also another reality, and that is no one needs your gifts. No one does. As the lyrics in the Miley Cyrus song goes, I can buy myself flowers, write my name in the sand, talk to myself for hours, say things that you don't understand. I can take myself dancing. I can hold my own hand, and I can love me better than you can. Which is effectively saying that nobody needs you to be charitable at all. We can all buy our own chocolate. We can get our own biscuits. We know where to get it and what flavor we like. We most certainly don't need anyone to get it for us. Only the very disabled or the very young need you to get them anything. The whole act of giving is completely pointless when you look at it from a logical standpoint. But when someone ignores your birthday or your anniversary, it hurts. But on the other hand, when someone gives you a specially made card, you know how it feels. When someone gets you your favorite snack, that feels like such a treat. We can all buy our own flowers. We can do all the chocolate buying by ourselves. But which of the two makes us feel better? When we get something from someone, when someone gives us something, or when we buy it ourselves? It's hard to tell, but there's definitely a much better feeling when you get something from someone. And this is absolutely crucial in life because we go through endless transactions where we're just showing up empty-handed all the time. But it plays a big role in business as well. Let's say you went to buy a coffee. Well, what do you get when you get the coffee? Yeah, me too. I get the coffee. I pay the amount I'm expected to pay, and I get exactly what I've ordered. It's a transaction, and that's that. And every day, millions of people go through transactions in exactly the same manner. However, let's say that there are two cafes side by side. They both have a decor that you like, and the staff are always very friendly. Even the coffee seems to be almost identical. But there's one small difference. One cafe gives you a little treat just every now and then. Now you tell me, which of the two cafes do you prefer? Clients will keep going to a place even when standards fall because they remember what they were given. You, as the giver, may forget what you've given and to whom, and so does the client. However, they remember how they were treated. They remember the feeling of getting something when all they were expecting was that transaction, that exchange of money. Renuka and I used to go to a restaurant every Tuesday. We'd often get a free drink, which is a lassi, when we visited, and at other times we'd get a free snack. When our nieces came along, they'd get a free lassi too. At times the service wasn't so good. At other times we weren't terribly happy with the food. However, we felt at home because of the generosity of the owner and the staff. A year ago, the owner sold the restaurant, and our experience has become purely transactional. We went there a couple of times, and then we didn't go there anymore. And we had been going there for 18 years in a row, every Tuesday. So if you had a restaurant that was closer, and you had equally good food, where would you go? Exactly, that's what we do as well. In so many situations, we make our choices purely based on goodwill that has been created. And goodwill is almost entirely created by giving. The giving behavior that plays out in your personal life then extends to business. If you find people who give in their business, you will find that they are just as charitable in their personal lives. They are people that you go out to dinner with and they decide to pick up the bill. And you'll find that older cultures, that means people who've lived in countries that have existed for a long time, there's always one person that ever pays the bill. There's never this embarrassing queue of people who pay their own portion based on what they ate and what they drank. And in newer cultures, pay for what you ate is almost always the default. And yet, it's not the default. If David Attenborough came to meet you for lunch, would you ask him to pay his share of the bill? Oh, no, you wouldn't. He's rich enough, so why are you picking up his tab? You're doing so because you want to give something. Now, what about that cousin or those friends that you're going out to dinner with? Why not pick up the bill for them as well? Why is there this double standard for someone famous versus someone that you love in your life, you admire, your friends, your relatives? Why is this double standard? It's not the default to pay what you eat. If the person across you is important enough, you will buy them flowers, you will buy them chocolate, you'll pay for their bill. So why not extend that courtesy to everyone, or at least as often as you can? When you do, giving becomes second nature. You were a selfish brat when you were a kid, because we all were. We are born selfish. We are born self-centered. And your parents worked really hard to stamp that selfishness out of you by telling you that you should share. And they came up with phrases like, you must learn to share, and sharing is caring, and all that kind of stuff. And then you looked around you at all the selfish people who were paying their own portion and not giving you anything extra and just making everything a transaction, and you decided that was the norm. You decided to forget all the things that your parents taught you. Why? Because who knows? You just decided. But we can all fix ourselves today, and there is a simple benchmark to know if you're a giver or not. When you're leaving the house, look at your hands. Just both hands, just raise them in front of your face. Are you empty-handed? Well, put something in that hand and leave. That simple act will make a difference with your friends, family, but also in your business. The 3 wise men could have come empty-handed, but they didn't. And that's why they go down in legend. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. In this podcast, we covered 3 points. The first one was to be interested. And this has been repeated over several podcasts, where asking questions, 1, 2, 3 questions, that's probably the best way to be interested, because you have to pay attention to what the other person is saying so that you can ask the second question. The second thing is to be interesting. And you can't be interesting if you're just regurgitating what everybody else is talking about, which is politics and more politics and just crime and nonsense like that. Learn about tulips, do something about soundproofing, whatever. Just figure out and learn something different. Make that goal today. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. There are lots of books that have interesting facts and details. Go down some rabbit hole or several rabbit holes and enjoy yourself. And yes, once you get a hobby, any hobby, you become more interesting. And the third thing is the 3 wise men principle. And that is, are you leaving home empty-handed? You can look at your hands. That tells you everything you need to know. And yes, when you go out with your friends or your family, pick up the bill. It doesn't matter that they're selfish or self-centered. Pick up the bill. Make yourself someone who they would like to go out with more often. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What's the one thing that you can do today? I think the one thing that you can do today, and this is the most crucial of all, is giving. So even if you don't ask questions, and even if you're not that interesting, you can give something. And it could be a small thing. You don't have to always buy something for someone. You can just make something. You can find something. You can even pick up some flowers along the way, wildflowers, or just about anything. I mean, it would be weird if you brought wildflowers for me, but, Renuka would like it. So that's the kind of thing that you want to do. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. I don't know if you've known about it, but I've been writing this book on talent and how doable greatness is better than genius. And I think it'll change the way you look at the world. One client wrote to me and he said, "This kind of gives me a lot of hope as a father." So Well, if you're a parent, this book is probably right up your alley. The second client wrote to me and said, well, I wish someone had told me this earlier, and I wish you would get a little more angry in the book, but, well, we choose not to get angry about it. But he said, this kind of stuff, if it were told to me, it would have been different. It would have been different for me as I grew up. So what is he talking about? He's talking about how we believe in inborn talent, how we believe it's a gift. And I won't call it nonsense, but you'll find that there is a very clear explanation of what are the components that cause people to become talented very quickly. And we're talking about something as little as 12 weeks. What is it? Well, find out at psychotactics.com/talent. Well, that's it from Psychotactics Land. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye.